Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. At UFC 287, Alex Pereira lost to Israel Adesanya, and he was brutally KO'd in the second round, losing his middleweight title. And there's been a lot of speculation since UFC 287. What's next for Israel Adesanya? What's next for Alex Pereira? Could there be a trilogy? Is Alex Pereira going to 205? I've made videos discussing UFC 287 and I've kind of touched on that, but I haven't made a video directly discussing what's next for Alex Pereira. And we've since gotten more information regarding what's next for Alex Pereira from Alex Pereira's YouTube channel and from Dana White recently at a post-fight presser. But I want to discuss, the knockout loss. I want to discuss the potential of a future trilogy with Israel Adesanya. And I also want to discuss how I believe Israel Adesanya could have very well ended the career of Alex Pereira at UFC 287. I believe it could be the beginning of the end for Alex Pereira. We're going to discuss all that in this video, but do me a favor, guys. If you enjoy the content on this channel, we are getting so close to 10,000 subscribers. Do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. I would really appreciate it. So at UFC 287, Alex Pereira comes in. He's 3-0 against Israel Adesanya. That's the narrative going in because of the two kickboxing fights where he knocked out Israel Adesanya in one of those kickboxing matches 6 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it may have been. And then he finishes him in the 5th round of UFC 281 to snatch the middleweight title off of him. But they have the rematch at UFC 287. Very competitive fight. Alex Pereira, overconfident, trying to march Adesanya down. One of the best counter strikers in the UFC. Adesanya hits him with a jab, then a right hand that rocks him, and then another right hand that sleeps him. And then on his way down, hits him with a nasty uppercut. And then after he falls, he's completely out cold. Adesanya lands a brutal hammer fist follow-up before the fight is officially stopped. One of the most brutal finishes I've seen in MMA. I mean, there's been worse, but the sequence, he was out on the second shot and he absorbed two massive power shots, one as he's falling down and then one as he's laying on the ground completely unconscious. And I do believe knockouts like this sometimes have a lasting effect on fighters. And I think this could be the case with Alex Pereira. And I do believe in this fight, he was just so overconfident knowing I've already finished Israel Adesanya twice. All I got to do is back him up and I'll finish him again. And he ended up getting caught and slept, and it may change the trajectory of his career. But one thing I want to discuss is not really that fight in itself, which that finishing sequence is a big part of this video. But I want to discuss something Israel Adesanya said in the lead up to the fight, and I want to discuss Alex Pereira's middleweight resume or UFC resume as a whole, which has been solely at middleweight. So Israel Adesanya, in the lead up to this fight, he said basically, I already cut the path for Alex Pereira to the middleweight title. Because Israel Adesanya came into the UFC, fought contenders, made his way to a middleweight title shot, won the belt, and then basically because of the backstory, that's why Alex Pereira was kind of fast-tracked to the title. Alex Pereira fought one ranked fighter before fighting for the middleweight title. And the reason for that, and this, I know a lot of people are going to start saying, oh, you're hating on Alex Pereira. I'm not hating on Alex Pereira. I have no problem with the UFC even giving him the title shot. Israel Adesanya had cleaned out the division. He had fought most of the guys. He had beat most of the guys in the top 5 of the division. He had beaten Robert Whittaker twice at that point. He just beaten the who's who in the division, and there wasn't really a whole lot of options for him. So the UFC actively made a decision to sign Alex Pereira. They gave him Andreas Michailidis in his first fight, which he was out-grappled in the first round, lost the first round, arguably. And then in the second round, the beginning of the second round, brutal flying knee KO for Alex Pereira. Well, who do they give him next? They give him Bruno Silva, an unranked middleweight fighter who's an okay fighter, don't get me wrong. But Bruno Silva, primarily a striker. Bruno Silva went out there and made Alex Pereira work for that win. Bruno Silva was landing good shots on the feet. Bruno Silva was able to grapple with Alex Pereira, take him down, control him a little bit. And Bruno Silva, even though he lost this fight, he made Alex Pereira look very, very human, and Bruno Silva isn't nowhere near the elite of the elite at middleweight. And then the UFC took a look after that win by Alex Pereira. They say, okay, we dodged a bullet there with Bruno Silva, and then Bruno Silva goes on to get finished by Gerald Meerschaert, and Alex Pereira only beat him by decision. Gerald Meerschaert is out there finishing Bruno Silva, but that's besides the point. He gets a fight with the most beatable middleweight in the top 10, in my opinion, at the time. I believe Sean Strickland is a good fighter. I'm not saying that he's a bad fighter. But if you looked at the top 10 at the time, and I remember looking at it, Sean Strickland was the only guy that I'm like, okay, Sean Strickland's not going to grapple him. Sean Strickland's going to go out there and strike with Alex Pereira. And I picked Alex Pereira to KO Sean Strickland. And that's exactly what happened. Sean Strickland went out there, struck with him, ended up paying for it and getting brutally KO'd in the first round. And Strickland never even attempted a takedown. He just marched forward, basically accepting this fight is going to be competed on the feet. And I'm fighting one of the most elite kickboxers ever. And I'm going to strike with him nonstop. And also, on top of that, Sean Strickland, he's not a very big middleweight. He used to fight at welterweight. And, Sean Strickland was just a very beatable, winnable matchup for Alex Pereira. And then after that fight, I don't know where Sean Strickland was ranked at the time, but he was ranked in the top 10. The UFC said, okay, he has a win over a guy ranked in the top 10. We are giving him a title shot. They fast-tracked him to Israel Adesanya because of that amazing backstory. And then you have Alex Pereira, who stylistically matches up very well with Israel Adesanya, because Israel Adesanya is primarily a striker. Alex Pereira is one of the best strikers, in combat sports. So, he kind of matches up with him well. Israel Adesanya beats him for the majority of the fight, even though it is competitive on the feet. Israel Adesanya wins the first, the third, and the fourth round. The third round was the only round that Israel Adesanya grappled. And once he got him down, and it was kind of like an off-balance takedown, where Alex Pereira kind of stepped through, was looking for maybe a takedown of his own, got tripped to the ground. Israel Adesanya then dominated Alex Pereira on the ground. Pereira could not get up to save his life. And I'm getting to a point here in a little bit. But then in the fifth round, Alex Pereira just pulls it out of the fire, just walks Israel Adesanya down, catches him with a left hook up against the fence, hurts him badly, starts to swarm him, and the ref steps in. Now, I do believe it was an early stoppage, but I believe Pereira probably would have finished him anyway. And then you get the rematch, and then you get the brutal KO, which we just saw at UFC 287, and Adesanya takes his belt back. And a lot of people after this fight were saying there should be a trilogy. And Adesanya, I could tell leading into the fight, and I even made a video about it leading into the fight, I could tell Adesanya was like, I'm going to win this fight, and I'm not fighting him again. I'm going to win it dominantly. I was winning the last fight, at UFC 281 before he got the TKO victory. I'm going to beat him here, and I'm going to move on to other things. I could tell that in the lead up. But a lot of people are saying, okay, maybe there should be a trilogy fight. Well, Alex Pereira never even spoke a word of a trilogy fight. After this fight, he said, look, I'm going up to 205. And Alex Pereira is massive for the middleweight division. And he was cutting weight for this fight like 3 weeks out. So he can only make that weight cut for so long. He's getting up there in age. He's in his late, I think he's like 36 years old at this point. And I just think Alex Pereira was already going to go to 205, even if he beat Israel Adesanya. I think he was going to move up to 205 and hope for a light heavyweight title shot. And, in this fight, he ends up losing. He ends up getting KO'd. A lot of fans would have got behind the narrative, okay, it's time for a trilogy fight. There's people saying, and I already made a whole video about this kind of in general, and I'll link it down in the description, the couple videos that I've made about UFC 287. But the fans would have got behind a narrative of Alex Pereira needs a rematch. But the reason Alex Pereira wasn't getting a rematch is, one, he got starched out cold after losing the first round. So, it's not like it was, it was competitive, don't get me wrong. But it's not like Alex Pereira was putting a beating on Israel Adesanya and then he got flukily KO'd in the fourth round after winning the majority of the fight. But also, Alex Pereira, not a long-reigning champion. This was his first title defense. Israel Adesanya was given an immediate rematch because he was a long-reigning champion. That is why he was given a rematch. On top of that, he was winning the majority of the fight up until he got finished in the fifth round. That is why Adesanya was given the rematch. Not because of these kickboxing fights, not because, he deserved a rematch just because, they're giving out rematches just to have immediate rematches. It was because he was a long-reigning champion, and it was because he was winning the fight until he got stopped. Alex Pereira does not check any of those boxes. He's not the long-reigning champ, and he wasn't winning the fight up until he got stopped. And anybody saying that, that's complete fantasy. And I do feel for Alex Pereira, and I wouldn't mind a trilogy fight, but I don't think it's good for Alex Pereira in his career. And people are saying Adesanya's ducking Pereira and he doesn't want that trilogy fight. He said, he's not really interested in fighting him again. I don't think that means he's scared of him. People are saying 3-1, 3-1. That's just a fantasy world because first off, the first kickboxing fight was a robbery decision for Alex Pereira. Israel Adesanya should have won that fight. The second kickboxing fight, Adesanya, if that was MMA, Pereira would have been done because of, he got a standing 8 count. Third fight, fair and square, Alex Pereira wins. But now he gets put out cold. It's done. It is done. We don't need a trilogy fight here. But not only does Adesanya say he's not interested in it, Alex Pereira doesn't look interested in it. If Alex Pereira got behind it and said, look, I gave him his immediate rematch, I want my immediate rematch, the fans would start to demand it. But I don't think it's good for Alex Pereira's career. I don't think a trilogy fight against Israel Adesanya is going to go well for him. That weight cut is brutal for him. He just got brutally KO'd. He needs some time off. And I just think Alex Pereira and his team has to know that trilogy fight, especially right away, is not a good idea at all. So anyone saying like Adesanya is ducking him or whatever, Alex Pereira doesn't want the trilogy. And that has been fairly clear because he put out a YouTube video. He is moving to 205 pounds. And my guess is he probably doesn't fight for the rest of the year. If he does fight, my guess is it'll probably be in like November, December at best. But honestly, after a scary KO like that, I think he needs a significant amount of time off. I know people talk about the medical suspensions. Those medical suspensions are absolutely bogus. It is, 6 months or whatever the time period may be, or unless cleared by a doctor. The reason the MMA media post those is because people are like, oh my God, this fighter's suspended for X amount of time. Those mean nothing, but I do believe Alex Pereira and his team will decide to take some time off. He just had back-to-back training camps, and now he just got brutally KO'd, and I think he will come back at 205. People know he's the former middleweight champion, and he can quickly move up the ranks at light heavyweight if he's able to get a big win. But who is he going to fight at light heavyweight? That is the real question. And I believe there is one matchup for Alex Pereira that makes perfect sense, but we'll get to that in a second. There is people speculating that Alex Pereira could walk right into a title shot against Jamahal Hill. Yuri Prohaska, we don't know when he's returning. He's injured. He hurt his shoulder. He might be out to the end of the year. Jamahal Hill just beat Glover Teixeira, who is one of Alex Pereira's best friends and coach. Just beat him to win the title. Glover Teixeira then retired. So people are already trying to push that storyline. That's not going to happen. Pereira just lost at middleweight. He's not going to move up to an immediate title shot. He's not still the champion at middleweight. He's not going to move up and fight Jamahal Hill. Plus, I really think the UFC is keen on potentially waiting for Yuri Prohaska. If Yuri Prohaska can return a little bit earlier, we'll get Jamahal Hill versus Yuri Prohaska. So what other options does that leave? You have Magomed Ankalaev sitting at number 2. I think the UFC wants to give Alex Pereira a fight that he can win. They showed that they wanted to kind of baby him at middleweight. I think they're going to try to do the same thing at light heavyweight. And Magomed Ankalaev, that's a nightmare matchup for Pereira. I know the name suggests he's some heavy grappler. Ankalaev is a very good striker, but he also has the grappling in his back pocket as well. I don't think that's going to happen. You have Jan Blachowicz, which I think is a very interesting fight. But Jan Blachowicz is a massive light heavyweight. I think he's going to be bigger than Alex Pereira. He's an elite striker, and he also has grappling as well. I don't think that's going to happen. Then you have Alexander Rakic sitting at number 4. I think stylistically that isn't a great matchup for Alex Pereira either. But it's going to have to be someone in the top 10. So who could it possibly be? I think the matchup that makes the most sense next for Alex Pereira, you have a fight coming up on May 13th. It's the main event of a fight night card. Actually, I don't think it's the main event anymore. I think it got switched to the co-main event. But you have Anthony Smith versus Johnny Walker. Anthony Smith sitting at number 5. Johnny Walker sitting at number 7. I think what the UFC is going to do, Pereira is going to sit out for a while. I do believe Pereira will fight the winner of Anthony Smith versus Johnny Walker, and the UFC is praying that it is Johnny Walker. Because Johnny Walker, if you look at that current top 10 of the UFC light heavyweight division, I believe Johnny Walker is the most winnable matchup for Alex Pereira. And Johnny Walker's been on a winning streak at this point. And if he beats Anthony Smith, which is possible, that is a perfect matchup for Alex Pereira at 205. And if he beats Johnny Walker beats Anthony Smith, he'll probably be ranked in the top 5. He'll probably be hanging around at number 4 or 5, depending on how the rankings shuffle around after the win. And I believe that Pereira will fight Johnny Walker. If he beats Johnny Walker, he will be on a short list of contenders for the winner of Jamahal Hill versus Yuri Prohaska, which probably won't happen till later this year anyway, because it makes sense. Pereira needs some time off. no matter what happens in the Johnny Walker-Anthony Smith fight, they're going to need some time off after that. So it makes perfect sense. He could fight the winner of that fight later this year. And the Johnny Walker fight's obviously the more winnable matchup. But Anthony Smith, it's not like Anthony Smith is some crazy elite grappler. He's a very good grappler, don't get me wrong. And that's where we're going to get to the end point of this video. But I do believe that Pereira could beat Anthony Smith. I think that's a harder matchup for Pereira. That's why I think the UFC is going to hope that Johnny Walker is able to get the job done, because Johnny Walker, his chin is just atrocious. He fights very crazy and aggressively and leaves his chin wide open. We've seen what Jamal Hill did to him, turned him into an absolute statue. But I do believe Anthony Smith is more beatable than the rest of the division in terms of the guys that I mentioned in the top 5. Even Nikita Krylov sitting at number 6. I think Nikita Krylov is a nightmare matchup for Alex Pereira. And so I do believe that Alex Pereira versus the winner of Johnny Walker versus Anthony Smith will be next for him. But I don't like the outlook for Alex Pereira in the light heavyweight division. That's why I believe Israel Adesanya may have ended his career. Not literally, but this is like the beginning. You know, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. This is the beginning of the end, because he's moving up to 205. He's not going to have that size advantage that he had at middleweight. And if Israel Adesanya, who's not a very large middleweight, is taking you down and controlling you, what do you think guys like Magomed Ankalaev, Jan Blachowicz, Alexander Rakic are going to do to you? I don't favor him against basically anyone in the top 5, maybe Anthony Smith, which we already discussed. I think he could beat Anthony Smith, but I don't think he's beating Jamal Hill. Who knows if Alex Pereira's power is going to fully translate to 205 pounds. Now, I do believe he will have knockout power, but it's not the same as when he's fighting a middleweight. Jamal Hill can take a good shot. He took good shots against Glover Teixeira, was able to survive. He's taken good shots previously in his career, has been able to survive. Now, Alex Pereira, you can say the accuracy, the kickboxing, the power that he has, he can win those fights. Jamal Hill could out-grapple him, in my opinion. Again, if Adesanya is taking you down and controlling you, Jamal Hill can. Yuri Prohaska. Now, Yuri Prohaska versus Alex Pereira would be very interesting, because Yuri's so overly aggressive, he could get KO'd, but Yuri has a chin of granite. Eventually it's going to go, and maybe it would go against Pereira. But Alex Pereira fights best when he's moving forward. When he's put on the back foot, he doesn't fight nowhere near as good. We've seen that in the Israel Adesanya fights. When Adesanya was moving forward, Pereira was having nowhere near the amount of success he was having when he was moving Adesanya backwards. And that was an adjustment we saw Adesanya make in the rematch. Yuri Prohaska just charging forward, throwing crazy wild strikes, throwing spinning back elbows. And also, Yuri has the grappling in his back pocket as well. I know he's not known as a grappler. I think he can out-grapple Alex Pereira. People have to stop with this narrative that just because he trains with Glover Teixeira, he's going to become an elite grappler. He's almost 36 years old. You know, I don't think that all of a sudden he's going to become some world-class elite grappler. The best hope for Alex Pereira, and I do believe it has improved, is for him to just get godly takedown defense and then use his striking on the feet. Because the jiu-jitsu, the get-up ability on the ground, the scrambling ability, it's just not going to work against much larger guys than he's seeing at middleweight. You know, it's not going to be the same against a Jamal Hill or a Yuri Prohaska or a Magomed Ankalaev or a Jan Blachowicz as it is against an Israel Adesanya, and he couldn't even get up against Israel Adesanya. Then you add the factor of where is Alex Pereira's confidence going to be? He just got flatlined by Israel Adesanya. And he's moving up in weight. All these guys arguably have more power than Israel Adesanya. Jan Blachowicz has unbelievable Polish power. And that's why I believe Alex Pereira will get no more than one win at light heavyweight. And honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if he doesn't win that, because he's so used to having this size advantage. He's so used to having this massive power advantage. And it's going to be closer to even at light heavyweight. Maybe there's a couple guys he's a little bit bigger than, but I just don't think he's going to have that advantage anymore. And I believe his grappling is just, there's no way to improve it the amount that he needs to improve it. And I just don't believe he's going to have a successful career at light heavyweight, even though I would love to see it. This isn't a video where I'm just sitting here hating on Alex Pereira. I like Alex Pereira. He's a great fighter. I just don't think he's going to have the success at light heavyweight. But what I would love to see, what is a hypothetical scenario that we've kind of talked about in different live streams over the past week, is imagine Alex Pereira is able to get to a title and able to get a title. Imagine Adesanya moving up to 205 for the Trilogy in an attempt to become double champ, because that's a whole entire different dynamic that you have a Pereira who doesn't have to cut down to 185. Honestly, I've picked Adesanya in both Pereira fights. I would consider picking Pereira at light heavyweight against Adesanya. So that is a massive fight that could happen, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be very difficult for Pereira to have legitimate success at light heavyweight. And even if he does have success, I believe it will be short-lived. We talked about this when Pereira, was in the lead up to the Adesanya first fight in the UFC. Pereira had a massive rise to success, a massive rise to the top. I believe his fall is going to be even quicker because, again, these matchups just don't favor him. Israel Adesanya was a matchup that just catered to his skill set and ultimately lost that at UFC 287. But you look at these other guys, they're very well-rounded. They have the grappling, and now he's giving up the size advantage. I personally, what I would have liked to seen is him stay at middleweight, him get a winnable fight, maybe, brutally KO Dricus du Plessis, which I believe he would have been able to, and then maybe win one more fight or even just that fight, get some confidence back after some time off, and then fight Adesanya in a trilogy at middleweight. But I just don't like to move the light heavyweight. I don't think he's going to find a lot of success there. And even if he does, let's say he gets the Johnny Walker fight later this year and he wins that, maybe he gets a title shot. I believe after that, it is the end of the road for Alex Pereira. He's not particularly old. I just looked. He's 35 going on 36. But, it's just getting KO'd like that. Where's his confidence going to be? He's fighting now larger guys with more power. And the benefits that he had because he was fighting at middleweight aren't going to be there anymore at light heavyweight. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. How do you think Alex Pereira will favor at 205? Would you have rather him stayed at 185? Let me know what you think. I'm genuinely curious. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And thank you so much for watching.